Okay, so we made a box using the primitive poly primitive create tool, but we need to make it look more like the bottom of one of these hammers, kind of rounded. It's best to start from a good shape, and you can actually compare this hammer to this hammer, both of which are in the file you have access to. They're very, very different. This is a very flat hammer, right? That's how it was made, and I did a terrible job at the bottom, by the way. This one I did a better job at the bottom. I also made it rounder. No one is correct. It's just that I started them out differently, and so the hammers turn out very differently. And certainly that can be changed after the fact, but it's good to start off from the right foot. So to not confuse things, I'm going to use my layers to turn off everything that's there. If you have one of my files from class and there's stuff in a layer, you can click this button right here. It turns them on and off. And I'm going to show you a trick that involves using vertexes to round out this whole thing. In order to do this trick, we need to be in the top view. And I'm going to go into vertex mode. And in order to do this, we need to understand for a second what happens if I select things in here. Now I'm going to go into like a 2 view just so I don't want the front, just so you all can see what is happening. Crap, there we go. So normally with vertexes we click one and it selects one, and I want, there we go. That might make more sense. Orient this so we can see what's going on. So you select one, it selects the one on top. And that makes sense. We are looking at this from the top. Therefore, whatever I'm clicking to select is selecting that one. But I make mention quite often that you have to be careful about drag selecting. Now, if you're in perspective view and you're very careful and you line yourself up this way and you drag select this way, then nothing happens. Well, that's fascinating. Normally those would select. I'm not sure. Stand by. Okay, problem solved, sort of. When I accidentally opened up that menu right here that I didn't mean to, I think I selected something that didn't allow me to drag select anything, which would have made this very difficult. Let's get to the right area. Alright, but now that it's working, I can show what I meant, which was if you're very careful and you line this up properly, we can drag select and get all of the ones at the top and then move those as we need to. But what we're actually doing is we're wanting to get all of the corners. Now, trying to select all the corners from perspective view would be very, very difficult. You'd have to like click, 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 click 4 times on each side. Chances are very high you get something that's wrong. But if you're in this top view and I drag select this corner right here, it gives me all 4 of these. If I hold down shift and do the same thing, just this corner, see how I'm only marqueing the corner? I'm not going for this, I'm not going for this, I'm not trying to get the whole cube, just the corner of each of these corners. And now I have all 4 corners, which means I can now grab my scale tool. I can scale them in this way and scale them in this way. And already I have substantially rounded what I'm working on. It's no longer a perfect cube. And I can kind of continue that in a little bit depending on how round I want this to be. I can also hold down shift and drag select these. I'm using scale because I want things to be symmetrical. Because I need things to be symmetrical in the one direction and the other. Trying to mirror this doesn't really work. I need to have the whole thing here and just be careful with my scale tool. Right? But doing that allows me to select certain things. Rounding it this way is a little bit trickier because there's nothing in the middle here, but that's okay. And I can go back to selecting these if I'm looking at them going, oh, I want them to, again, be rounded. And if we look in this view, that's starting to look like a cylinder. It's not going to be perfectly faceted. If I go to object mode for a second, yeah, you're going to see some sharper edges. Why? Because there's not enough polygons. And we will have a tool later that sort of automatically adds a bunch more. We don't want them there right now because it's going to be more difficult to model. So we just want something that's vaguely in the direction of being rounded. All right, so we're using the top view to drag select a bunch of curves at once, and we're using the scale tool to move the things, right? Because trying to use the move tool, you'd have to move one and then the other and hope they matched. I don't like hoping they match. I want them to be exact. Now, if I bring back up this for a second and take a look at all the hammers, I mentioned before something I got right the one time and wrong the other time was the bottom here. So pinching that in to look like how I want it. And if your camera gets a little janky, select what you want to focus on and hit F and it will re-tumble around that area. Now for this, because the bottom is pretty far separated from everything else, I can select all of these and I can scale in this direction a bit and scale in this direction. Technically, because these are all along a line, I can use the general scale feature in the middle. However, it's not really necessary because I'm going to be scaling more along one axis than the other anyways, so it doesn't really matter. The other thing I can do is I can use my move tool to bring this up. These were all equidistant before, and that's great, but honestly, I don't need the bottom to be that far distant compared to these, right? I just want to give it a little bit of an edge there, little bit of a curve in. And I'm choosing to do vertexes in this direction because I know I can easily select it. And I know I have that selected and nothing else because this is flush with the bottom. If anything else was selected, this would happen. If you try selecting just the bottom of this and you get a marquee tool somewhere in the middle, nope. Make sure you are on the correct plane. So if I have them all in line, then the marquee tool should be selecting them in a line. And I probably wouldn't fix this much further than this right now because I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of this. I have to see how the rest of the hammer is going to look. This can always be changed after the fact. So I can, there we go. Scroll down here. Right, I can go into the bottom of this and I can rescale it. I can select edge loops or vertexes and I can rescale it. So I kind of get the general bottom of this going, and then I do a lot more, and then I might go back. So you're never going to get it perfect on the first time. I'm going to say that in probably all the videos. You're not going to get it perfect on the first time. That's okay. I'm actually looking at this whole thing going, it's kind of tall. I'm not going to scale it this way. I'm going to go into vertex mode. Select all of these, move it down a little bit, drag select to add the next line, move it down a little bit, tumble around before I go any further, make sure I didn't mess anything up, just kind of squashing it with the components, not with this. I don't want to touch this. I want to only change things with components. Now that becomes very obvious once you get this much going. But when you're still here and it's just a few pieces, it can be very tempting to use these scales. Don't. Move some components around. Move some vertexes around, or any other component, but do that rather than scaling here.